and welcome to the Dial Global Virtual Lounge. This is a show where we discuss the future of the modern workplace and the impact of diversity, inclusion and belonging with the world's most successful and innovative business leaders. Today we are joined by James Millward, who is the Managing Director of Eurilait. We're joined by Christiaanse, the chairman of AK Stoddart and formerly CEO for Brakes and Avico, Helene Roberts, the CEO of Robinson PLC, and Lawrence Trist, the managing director for the cake business at Finsbury Food Group. Welcome to the show, guys and girls.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So today we're going to be talking about, obviously, COVID-19, and of course this series is called Leading in Uncertain Times, so I think really fantastic to hear about how you're all finding things as business leaders in your respective sectors, what is going on, and also really keen to kind of discuss some of the latest insights on what we feel the future of food manufacturing, FMCG, could possibly look like. But before we get into all of that, I wonder whether we could do a very quick round robin and just go through each of you a little bit about the business, some about the current environment and what you are facing with your respective teams at the moment. And James, I'm going to come to you first. I love to pick on you, if that's okay. So we'll come to you first.
Okay, so a bit of background. So Eurilait, we import cheese from Europe, mainly France, Spain, Italy, Greece, Cyprus, supplying a multitude of customers from retailer right the way through to food service, industrial and wholesale. So that in itself has created a number of challenges, which I'll come on to. But we're based here in Somerset. We're a single site operation, although we're owned by two of France's biggest dairy groups, later in Eurilait, who are in themselves part of much bigger agricultural cooperatives. So we're about 100 people here, 50 people downstairs, 50 people upstairs. So when I say upstairs, all the functions of the office are up on this floor with 50 operational staff downstairs, processing, packing, assembling various types of mainly cheese, but dairy-based offers for customers. We're a seasonal business as well, so things tend to go up at summer, in the summer, as we sort of get into eating and sharing food outside. So what used to be bacon camembert at Christmas is now an all year round product. So that's huge business for us. And then obviously Christmas. So our workforce will double as we bring in agency, generally European agency, to cope with peak Christmas demand. So that's a bit of background about Eurilait. What's happening at the moment? Well, it's, you know, we had quite a good insight of what was happening because it happened in France a couple of weeks before us, and we were lucky that we were always a week ahead of any government guidelines. So we started the non-essential, those people that could work from home, we started working from home a good week or so before it then became best practice, if you like. We have had to furlough a few members of the team, about 9 people in total. But we furlough those people based on what type of business they were associated with. So our food service, wholesale, industrial business has really taken a hit. We're about 80% down in April versus normal because all the pubs, restaurants, etc. are closed. So we offered those people the opportunity to furlough. And as if luck would have it, those people tended to be those individuals with young children who would find it very difficult to work from home. They were part-time, so actually it was of the 9, 6 of them are ladies, one who was pregnant, and therefore the opportunity to be furloughed was met with a great acceptance. So it wasn't certainly a challenge from our point of view. But of the other 41 people, excluding myself, my quality manager and my supply chain manager, everyone else is working from home and has been now for 6 weeks. So no detriment to the business, to be fair. So retail's performing quite well, not quite as well as we experienced in the panic buying at the end of March. So continental cheese, believe it or not, has settled down to broadly where it normally would. People certainly aren't going out stockpiling camembert, which is a bit of a shame. So that's where we're currently at. So challenging times ahead, particularly on forecasting. You know, when pubs, schools, restaurants are going to open up again is anyone's guess, but that has such a massive impact on our supply chain. The ability for farmers to process milk in France, so right away further back, you know, cows still need milking. We're at spring flush, so there's a lot of milk around, but the demand not only in the UK, but across Europe for restaurant, cafe, food service, industrial has fallen quite significantly. So some much bigger, broader challenges for us to overcome in the coming months, I guess.
Thanks for sharing, James. And you're actually the only one out of all of us who are in the office right now. Interestingly.
Every day, Layla, every day.
I'm in my virtual office, Layla. I think that's fair to say.
We're all in our virtual
away,
offices,
so I've got no
yes.
excuse,
Ton.
Yeah, as you know, I'm involved in a number of businesses, but since there is a steak display behind my back, I will focus on Stoddart for a moment. AK Stoddart is a medium-sized beef slaughter company in Scotland, mainly focused on Aberdeen Angus quality beef. What we have seen is that our normal portfolio, if you like, of customers and cuts are steaks towards restaurants or out of home, which is also where you would fetch the best possible price for a piece of quality beef. But we also had obviously the forequarters to deal with, and those products will be turned into mince and hamburgers and these type of products, and they would find their way to retail. What we have now seen overnight is that our customer mix and our product mix have changed. So instead of, let's say 80% out of home, mainly focused on the quality cuts, it is the reverse. And most of our products now go into retail as mincemeat and other sort of easier products that people tend to stock at home in their freezer. The problem is that that's not a sustainable model, because that goes at the expense of our margins, as you can imagine. So at the moment, we've cut down on personnel. So furlough is the magic word there. We have cut down roughly 40% of our slaughter capacity. Just keep the business going. But we need to think about the future, because the future will change. Everything will change. Nothing will be the same. And this current product and customer mix that we have ended up just by default helps us to make it through the day, but it doesn't guarantee us any future.
Thanks, Ton. And Helene?
So I work at Robinson, and actually we are a packaging company that's supplying to not just the food chain, but also customers who are manufacturing personal care and household cleaning. So we employ about 300 employees, both here in the UK and in Poland. We are a small business. We're listed on the AIM, but we're making packaging, plastic packaging such as bottles, injection molded plastics on one side, which is the majority of our business, but we also have a very sort of beautiful gift box business, which is very much around premium chocolates and candles and those sorts of areas. So I guess similar to what the guys have been saying before me, we have obviously looked at our office-based staff, add to the numbers, and they're working remotely, which for many of them in the last been working in the office for the last 20-30 years. That's been quite a change in sort of a cultural behavioural perspective, and not having that sort of dance around the kettle in the morning and the office chats that really lost, and feeling a level of isolation in some ways. But the majority of people are clearly still working away incredibly hard, 3-shift patterns in the factories. And not just about putting clear procedures in place, which we had to do, and obviously following the guidelines, but also overcoming people's fears, natural fears of being the only ones that haven't been furloughed or haven't been kept at home or asked to work from home. And as those sort of key workers, how do we give them support through communication and just generally listening to those concerns that they've got. In terms of the impact on our business, a level of mixed. Some of our customers is still continuous business. Some areas have really spiked. Hand wash bottles, sanitizer bottles. We can't make enough, and even sort of linking up with the NHS and supplying into the NHS through some of our customers who may have been making candles before and now suddenly making sanitizer or another product relevant for them. It's just about establishing those supply chains, which has taken some time, but now we're there. It's about really sort of building on that. So completely like Ton said, the future is going to be, I think, quite different for us as a business.
Fascinating. And finally, Lawrence.
Okay, so I'm the managing director of our cake business. We're a specialty bakery group made up of a cake business and a bread business. Our cake business is 70% retailer branded and 30% licensed branded. Licensed brands such as Mars, Disney, Thornton's, etc. So we make celebration cakes and round cakes and bites. So if any birthday party, I suspect at some point in all your lives we've been involved in some sort of birthday party with our cake. So in terms of the way we've gone through this, obviously we're part of the food supply chain as you guys are as well. So we see our role very much as part of that. So we needed to continue with the manufacture of our products. There is a demand for them. The majority of colleagues, employees within cake are in the bakeries. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that they're communicated to and they were reassured. So very early on, we took the business decision that we would follow government guidelines because they're obviously guided by health officials and people who understand the best way to navigate our way through this. So we've stuck to following those guidelines. And what that's meant is we have very hygienic facilities anyway, because obviously it's food manufacture, but we've also instigated a lot of social distancing in our bakery. So demarcation on floors, videos, one-ways, remove 2 people operations, even knocked holes in walls to create extra doorways in canteens, etc. So we've done a lot. The first thing, I think Helene touched on this, is making sure that we're communicating, reassuring people, because people are worried, they're scared of this time, of the impact this might have. Demand for cakes is still there. We see this as essential. It's not a great time they're all having out there at the moment, so we all need our treats, and we play a big part in that. Where we're seeing demand drop off is we have a retail and food service business. Obviously, the food service business has dropped off a bit, but it's not a major part of our business. And in retail, celebration cakes, whilst people are still buying them, they're not having such big gatherings and need for celebration. And for us, we've managed the crisis. Now we can talk about that a bit more as we go through. I'd say that we're managing it well. The initial hits, i.e. changes and things that we need to do, has slowed a little bit. And now, which again, Helene and Tom both touched on it, it's now about how we go forward. We've got the model of what the future looked like. There's lots of lovely terms being bandied around about new worlds and all this kind of stuff. But quite frankly, this is a change of consumer habits, shopper habits, retail habits, competition habits, everyone's habits. And so the best thing we need to do, or all businesses need to do, is model what that will look like. Put your strategies and your plans according to what that will be. And that's now where we are as a business. We're looking forward.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much for that, Lawrence. And you've all given some really valuable insight there. You can see there's a lot of still similarities, but also a number of differences when it comes to consumers. And I guess because of the very specific sector and areas of the FMCG and supply chain that you are all in. One thing that I found quite fascinating, just speaking with other executives across the board, is that a lot of businesses and people tend to think that those in the FMCG industry are having, I don't want to say an easy ride, but because food and packaging and FMCG in general is such a staple core requirement that these industries must be absolutely fine, when actually it's not necessarily the case. A number of the manufacturing businesses, even in say ready meal manufacturers, have seen a big old drop when it comes to their to consumer buying habits and the fact that certain things that might be deemed as perhaps luxurious can be now made at home in a very different way. Are people going to continue actually making from scratch certain products at home, or are they going to go out and kind of be going into the supermarkets or continuing the former eating and or buying habits that they might have possibly had before? But I think certainly some of the good things, and you mentioned there, Lawrence, some of the nice terms being banded around about the new world, and obviously there are good things about this because there's a lot of togetherness, there's a lot of connectedness. But I think personally my heart goes out to FMCG businesses, because I think it's a far more challenging place to be than it would be in a lot of the service sectors, where it's easier to kind of have everyone maybe go into home working, where actually you're managing the complexities of what are often a large and complex manufacturing environment. But anyhow, kind of moving on into obviously the future trends, and whilst no one's got a glass crystal ball to predict what the future might look like. I wondered from your side, because obviously you've all had a wealth of experience within your present organisations and previously, and you've seen this industry over many years of waves and peaks and troughs. What are your thoughts surrounding what consumers may do, given your prior knowledge, or what do you think the future could possibly look like? Now, I know we can't predict completely, and I know we have to be careful about throwing out wild predictions, but have you any thoughts of what you think the future of the industry and or the workplace could look like? Because I think this would be valuable for listeners to to maybe learn from your expertise.
So if I go, that's a really, really good question. And I guess there isn't really a right or a wrong answer here, because in truth, no one really knows. We talk about return to normal, and I talk to my parents and friends a lot about return to normal. But the question is what is normal going to be? Because there are so many other factors, whether it's economics and all those people that unfortunately have been massively impacted by what's been going on for the last 6-7 weeks. That, how long is it going to take the economy to recover so that people are still are going to have that discretionary spend available to eat out again? So whilst restaurants and pubs might open again, and they might open again with some form of social distancing and therefore less covers, how many of them are sustainable in that format? No one knows. Equally, how long is it going to take before the economy recovers so that those restaurants are then full again? And it could be 2-3 years. So I think there has to be an element of, from our perspective, great that our business is split across retail and then food service industrial. I've got, colleagues and friends whose businesses are purely aimed at coffee shops, for instance. We're having a very difficult time right now. But I think there has to be an element of prudence when it comes to forecasting. And therefore, you do have the ability, probably a little bit for Tom with cows, you don't have to produce quite as much milk in the next year or 2 years. You feed the cows less, you don't make as many cows pregnant, because you have to think about it in that context, to go right back to the basis of the supply chain. And it's not just a case of making cheese, cutting, processing and selling it. And then the other bit I just do want to touch on is what's normal in the workplace. So whilst people think we're having an easy ride, sometimes actually it's thrown some real insight for me around future ways of working. If you'd have asked me a week ago, where we probably only have 2 people who work from home because they're sales guys, you've got the best part of 40 people working from home, and right now it appears to be working really well. Zoom is fantastic, or there are other obviously video meeting conferencing facilities available, but it's proving really, really constructive, even just at a team level. So ordinarily your teams weren't all getting together on a daily conference call. That's happening, and everything I see in here is that there's some very constructive and great thought coming out through having that formal process. And the other bit there is that it's perhaps giving some of those people a bit of formal process, to touch on Elena's point, where they're no longer coming into the office and they're not having that chat around coffee. This formal once a day get together with their team is adding a bit of structure and process, and an opportunity to see their work colleagues and have a chat. But I think the longer that goes on, I think some people will find that quite difficult. So I'm already noticing, there are some individuals that are desperate to come back to work. The novelty of 3 weeks working from home has now gone. It's a bit like kids, my kids are older now, but friends who've got younger kids they struggle to get their kids to go to school, and now all the kids are asking is when they can go back to school. And I think there's a bit of that now in the workplace, where I'm sure as a business we'll take a completely different view in the future and be more relaxed about teams working from home and having that flexibility in departments outside of just sales and finance, supply chain. The technical teams are all doing a brilliant job working from home, but I think you still need to have that kind of morale boost, whether it's a daily basis or we run a weekly quiz on a Friday. We change our backgrounds on a Friday. I've introduced my team to a fantastic website called Crap Taxidermy. So you can get some brilliant, just to bring a bit of humility and life and fun back into the workplace that you'd normally experience through friendly banter and cajoling and motivating each other. So it's going to be, I think we're going to see a lot more of this home-based working, certainly, from a Eurilait perspective in the future when things do come back to whatever normal is.
Yeah, well, there's obviously a lot of stuff that we don't know, but there's also things that we do know. Also, when this is over, or whatever that means, this new reality, people will still consume the same amount of calories, right? So they just will not consume them at the same time, in the same fashion, or buy products from the same channel as they've done before. But in the end, they will still consume the same amount of calories. So there will be winners, there will be losers, there will be businesses that will triple, 4 times, 5 times, 10 times the size, and there will be businesses disappearing. And the most interesting businesses will be the ones that are in trouble, but actually will transform and end up in one of the, in a situation where their future is viable. The weird thing is that what I see now is that it almost feels like rabbits caught in headlights. A lot of business leaders, a lot of people are just focusing on, let's survive today, let's get the cash in, the furlough, all this. And you have to do that, obviously. But there is still very, very little talk about, what are the various scenarios? What can this new reality for my particular business look like? But there is stuff that we know. There is stuff. If you take food retail, for instance, we do know that whatever happens, and if the budgets are tight, the German discounters will be the cheapest. So they will win. You already know now that the German discounters will win. What we also have learned is that people have learned now to cook and appreciate provenance and appreciate smaller suppliers closer. So you do know these type of outlets will win. We don't know if it's 10% or 30% or 40%, but we know the direction. And we do know therefore also that the big 4, the big 5 retailers in the UK actually will be squeezed. They will lose market share. So all the businesses that have focused and are completely designed on servicing those outlets, they need to think about what will happen if people start buying more from local producers, have products supplied to their home rather than going to a store, or actually are just so tight that they have to go to the cheapest outlet, which is the Germans anyhow. So building those scenarios around the stuff that we actually can know and can predict, that is probably what should happen.
That's really interesting insight. I'm just going to make a quick comment, actually, if that's okay. I mean, what does everyone else think about this when it comes to local producers and such like? So I think what you're seeing is kind of a lot of people wanting to support community, and my family certainly want to support local businesses and UK businesses certainly during times of trouble, which I suppose is conflicting to the German retailers. But I guess on the other flip side, as you've said, that there are people who are struggling now to survive and aren't in fortuitous positions where they're able to have anywhere near the disposable income that they might possibly have had before. Therefore, luxuries have got to go out the window just purely from a survival point of view. So again, I don't have an answer to the comment, but it's a very interesting juxtaposition, I guess.
I think people will adapt, and what they've done is they've adapted to the current environment. Hearing this morning about discussion about people going back to the weekly shop. Well, who on earth wants to face that queue outside of your local supermarket every day to buy, £5 to £10 basket size? Whereas actually, once you get in there, you're going to make damn sure and buy the types of products have the shelf life that mean you don't have to go back to that for another week or so. And it's probably aligned with how flexible or available online is, and that's fairly sporadic, area by area. Some areas seem to have very good access to online delivery, in other areas less so. So it might be anecdotal, but I think people will just, I think they will be more considered in their consumption. They may consume the same amount of calories, but that may change in terms of where they want to choose to shop or the channel in which they want to use. And it's also the people who've kind of, helped you survive through the crisis. And that's anecdotally what I'm hearing from, neighbours and people that I'm speaking to. It's the local farmer who just, you managed to get your eggs from because you couldn't get to a local supermarket at the times that you wanted to shop or were able to shop. So it's horses for courses, I think, for people, for consumers. People will adapt to the post-crisis era and go back to that. And it will be the same, I think, in essence, in terms of in our work environment, a bit like James was talking about. People have had to adapt by working from home. It's been very clear. I think for some people, they'll make like an element of that, but almost they've got a bit of cabin fever at the moment because they feel so detached because it's 9 to 5 every day working from home and losing that sort of connectivity, no matter how many Team Olympics that we're putting on over Zoom and the rest, which, you know, we're all valiantly doing. But I think people will naturally want to adapt, and maybe it might not become an either or. You know, people might work from home more often. And actually now it's more acceptable. But when you are on conference calls, I mean, a year ago, if I was on a conference call, my 8-year-old child would be banished from 50 meters away from me. And the dog would have been kicked out as well for making a noise because, you know, it was kind of wasn't seen as professional. Whereas now, you know, I've been in conference calls with babies on knees. My daughter's been in there with pictures and coming to join in at times, you know. So I think it's a lot more relaxed, and that doesn't, you know, give an impression of you're not doing your job, you're not getting on with it, you're not being professional, but it's just reality of you are working from home with your family around you quite often, you know, homeschooled at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I suppose for me, the first thing I agree completely with Tom in terms of we're still talking a lot about the here and now, the crisis that's happening now. If in a business world, the ones who will win going forward, and that's what we're all trying to do, drive growth and expand our business, are the ones who get ahead. You know, and you're right, Layla, you said there's no such thing as a crystal ball, but you know, you've got to start trying to model what that's going to be. So the way I'm viewing the future, as we come into this or come out of this situation into the future, it's potentially going to be recessionary. You know, we're talking about the worst recession that we've seen for, you know, it goes anything from 10 years to 300 years is all the stuff I read, as I avidly read all different media sort of places. I think the local sourcing is really key that Helene touched upon. You know, I think consumer habits will change. People will do less top-up shopping. They will buy locally. They'll buy locally as a bit of a reward, a thank you for people who did support them, as well as actually wanting to support their own country and potentially a bit of a fear of bringing things in from other countries. I think in terms of the sectors that people buy from, it will be a gradual recovery. And what I mean by that is we won't suddenly go back to where we were and all the bars and restaurants open and all the retailers supply the same. As Tom pointed out, we'll consume the same amount of calories, but we'll buy them in different places. And the recovery for the different channels, when you talk about things like online, at home, retail, will be at different levels. And again, it's how you forecast and predict that. And then in terms of the general way we live our lives, and we're concentrating a bit on work here, but you know, in totality, the way we live our lives in our work lives, this is a reset. You know, I get that. It's really fascinating the way people have literally ducked to water, adopted video conferencing. And yes, there is a fantastic acceptance of a kid walking in with a drawing or asking something when you're in the middle of a high-powered business meeting, and people accept that. And I think that's nice. I think that's great, the way we're a bit more accepting. But I think in terms of the reset thing, I think we won't immediately all fall back to the office. We all like people. We all need people. We're all physical. We like positive affirmation. We like to be with people, create energy. There'll be a balance between the two. But one of the reset things I'm talking about is we've probably over the last few decades adopted lots of things which are inefficient in our lives. And through this, we've kind of stopped doing some of them because we're forced to stop doing them. So I don't think we'll immediately go back and do them again. I was reading an article, there's 21 days for a habit to become established, and we've done that now. So some of these habits that we're going through now will become established in the ways of working. And I think going forward, we'll still have a load of social distancing in our lives. There'll still be a bit of worry and fear until we come up with either a cure or a vaccine. And so therefore, the communication will be on a more localized level, in more individual level rather than the business level. But yeah, look, I think it is going to be a different world that we head into, and we need to get ahead and work out what that's going to be. We're not going to be perfect in those plans, but you know, let's have a plan. Let's work out how we're going to go forward, as opposed to looking back. Retrospective leadership is fantastic. We can all do that.
Yeah, Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess, what's interesting that a number of you pointed out there was, obviously the amount of change that's happened. And you think about kind of leadership and management spiel and such like, and people formatively talking about being agents for change and all this kind of stuff. And you think, well, nothing has diminished that more so than right now, because we really have kind of done a huge flip and had to because of absolute necessity. But what's amazing is we've seen that actually the vast majority of people and industries have adapted incredibly well in a ridiculously short period of time. And again, we keep talking about what the future looks like. We've got some real kind of good possibilities here from all of you by way of preparation. And obviously, you're all leaders of significant teams, and there's many people who look to you for guidance. And I wondered, as we move into kind of a next subject around kind of advice for leaders, whether it be existing leaders, C-suite leaders, etc., who are in the same boat, thinking, oh my goodness, this is pretty tough, and I'm having to be the one who puts a strong face on and reassure everyone, to those who are, potentially aspiring, growing upwards within their career, thinking, well, how do you plan for the future? Because clearly you've got to make a plan, as Lawrence has said. You've got to make a plan, even if you kind of don't necessarily know what might be held within that future. So I wonder, to all of you, first of all, what advice, I guess, would you give to other leaders who are in this scenario? And without getting into the nuts and bolts of strategic planning, could we all maybe give a couple of key bullet points for things that you are now starting to do to plan to get out of this in terms of exit strategy, and any best practice, positive advice that we can share?
Well, I think the word that you just used was scenarios, and I think that is very, very important. Obviously, we can't predict. It will be different in 3 months, will be different in 6 months, might actually be different in 3 years. So I think leadership needs to be agile, leadership needs to be flexible, and need to think in different type of scenarios that could come to us, and make sure that you're flexible enough to be able to play any of those if possible. And it actually touches one of the subjects that I presume you wanted to raise anyhow, which is diversity, in the boardroom, if you like. And I've been thinking about this because in times like these, where we are uncertain as to what will come to us, I think a more diverse boardroom would actually give far more guidance than a group with the same mind and the same thoughts. And if you look at different scenarios, it becomes quite interesting what type of dynamics you could create in a boardroom. And I don't just talk about gender or ethnical background, but let's say, for instance, artists or writers. Why have there, in all the big boardrooms, why were there no writers? Because writers, they make scenarios every day. They think about how can the future look like. And there are actually quite a few books and films, as we all know, about pandemics and the viruses, and because they're made up by people that write novels. But since none of these type of people are in the boardroom nobody thinks about these type of scenarios. There were no scenarios. We are not prepared. And I think that is a result of boardrooms being too single-minded. So if anything makes the case for diversity, it is the situation we're in right now.
I absolutely couldn't agree more. Well, obviously, you probably knew that I would say that, but obviously, what you're describing is groupthink, basically. That there is really no excuse right now for not having a virtual boardroom that is made up of lots of different ideas and viewpoints, because ultimately what we're after, whilst you said that, Ton, it's not ethnicity, it's not gender, it's not race, etc. It's about diversity of thought. And if we don't have that diversity of thought right now, we're never going to innovate ourselves out of crisis, I guess.
I can't agree more.
I don't think it's just the boardroom. I think that's true of all levels, within the business, and actually utilising, giving a voice to people at all levels within the business as well, rather than being directional in style, but including people and bringing their input, because they will have potentially a very different viewpoint on how to achieve things, how to, flex things. We will need to adapt. We did our 3-year plan. We finished it the week before lockdown. And quite frankly, you've got to relook at the whole thing in light of what we've just gone through, and we need to do that quickly. And that's what we've been working on. once we put all the defensive actions in place, we don't know if it's going to be a V recovery, as people call it, or an L recovery. But what we do know is that the 3-year plan that we've got in place seemed pretty, solid, the right thing to get us in terms of growth. How we get there now might be quite different. So the pathway is going to be different.
I agree.
Yeah,
and in all fairness, if you look at what the businesses are doing as we speak in terms of surviving and reinventing them, it's more the people and the team leaders and the people on the shop level that actually are doing that. I mean, the retailers are now hailed as heroes because they provide us with food and the stock to shelves. But it's actually people on the shop floor and shop level doing that more than the boardroom, if you like. Nonetheless, if you look at guidance, going forward, strategy, people will look up at their leaders and would expect them to give some sort of direction and some sort of communication. And that is exactly, to my opinion, what is lacking at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, I think the whole thing on diversity and inclusivity in the boardroom and further down the organisation hasn't actually changed because of this. What's actually happened is the people who've recognised the need and the benefits that you get from having that are going to be able to reap the benefits going forward because they've already got diverse teams, they've already got inclusive teams. So that ability to think about the scenarios is already going to be in place. So they're the ones who are going to be going, well, isn't it lucky that we were ahead of this? For me, the leaders of the present time need to be resilient. They need to be statesman-like, but they need to give the direction and they need to give the communication. Because what you're going to get, and you're seeing a lot of this in terms of the feedback we're getting from our governmental leaders, is not everyone will agree with what you're doing, but you've got to do something. You've got to take us forward, and that's what these guys are doing. And like I said before, I think the retrospective leadership, everyone can retrospectively come up with a great idea. It's the real leaders, the ones who come up with the ideas or encourage scenario planning within their teams for ideas that could be taking you forward, not necessarily looking back. And we, same as Helene, we hadn't completed our strat plan, but we were right in the middle of it. And we were focusing quite a lot on the operational side of our business because we sat in rooms going, well, consumer habits have been quite similar for the last few years. I don't think they're going to change. Growth of the discounters, all that. That was wrong, wasn't it? So we've gone right back to the start of it, redone our time plan, and we're looking back at the consumer, the competition, the shopper, the customer, because it is going to greatly change.
I'll add to that. I think there's an element of being agile as well. I think if one thing the last 6 weeks has taught us, it's the ability and the strength that we have in being agile and changing the way we do things. The ability of we weren't freezing a whole amount of cheese not that long ago, and all of a sudden now we're freezing huge quantities. And guess what? In some instances, it bakes a lot better than it did before you froze it. So there are a huge number of opportunities. Oh yeah, incredible. And so there's a huge number of opportunities come out of this. And that, you're right, Tom. That changes your perception in terms of how you can run your business in years to come. The benefit of how you smooth your plans out, how you can be a lot more inclusive with different types of product, different types of people to get involved at different times of the year. So it's a bit like rewriting the copybook, if you like, of giving you an opportunity to look at lots and lots of different things in lots and lots of different ways. The big question, though, and I suppose it's being a little bit cynical or probably realist, I'd like to say, is that the statesman-like approach can sometimes have a negative impact in times where people are looking for humility and to be inclusive and to bring people together. For me, it's about being one and not seeing yourself as being at a different level. You're absolutely right. And if anything, I found really hard in the last 6 weeks, it's trying to remain that positive attitude and being not so much just an optimist, but being realist and everything else. I actually had a week's holiday planned for April, and I implore everybody, if you've got holiday plans, still take it. You might not be able to go to Spain, but having that week away from work is massive. And so for me, it's about making sure people try and live their lives as naturally as they can, still take that time away to spend time with their family if they can, or a lot of us are spending time with their family, I guess. because it still gives you that opportunity to unwind and read books and cook with your family and all those sorts of things. And you can always come back afresh. So I think one bit of advice I've got for people, don't just cancel your holidays and cancel your plans because you now can't jump on a plane. Take that time off, be human, be realistic, and you can come back with a fresh set of ideas and feeling energized, because it is quite tough, especially when you're, you know, there was 50 of us in here, it's one. I'm on my own.
We've actually set up a group within Finsbury in the cake division for remote workers, giving advice on things to keep kids entertained, but also yourself.
That's great.
And interestingly enough, you know, one of the points we've discussed quite a lot is about the holidays. You're right, James, in terms of people should still take holidays. You still need some downtime. And so, you know, just this morning, actually, someone posted on there that they're going to take a holiday in a couple of weeks' time. They were due to go to Norfolk. They don't think they're going to be able to go to Norfolk. So now what they're doing is they're camping in the back garden.
Perfect.
So they pitch their tent and they're going to have a week away in their back garden, which I found quite amusing, seeing the rain's coming down quite considerably at the moment. But you're right. You still need that. Just because you're at home all the time, you need that downtime. You need to re-energize your brain and your body.
We actually made a decision about Easter weekend, and normally we would work through the shift patterns. We actually redesigned the shift pattern so everybody finished on either Thursday night or Friday night and went back on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we did it to say thank you to the staff, so it gave them a long weekend on a traditional time when you're together with your family, and albeit for people now more of a nuclear family, but really important for people to be able to just have that family time and give it back to them, because they were, you know, people were tired. They've been working long hours, overtime, shift patterns, you know, and you know, it was a sort of a gratitude and a thank you, and just giving out Easter eggs to people. It's a small thing, but you know, it's something we'd never done before. Those visual things that you can do. Say thanks ever so much. But I think part of it is about communicating, and part to direct people, but part of it's also about rewarding and recognizing and showing our gratitude to the teams for the effort, particularly in our industry sectors where we are working through this. And you know, we've got key workers essentially working for us in factory environments. And I think the other point for me is about transparency. So I think the important point is actually people do want to know, and if there's any lesson we can learn from, you know, maybe the government, or you know, you watch the briefings, people just want to know. And you might not be able to tell them everything, but if you have that constant drip so that you are transparent, I think it's a really helpful point for your teams.
I think that's so key. You know, the communication aspect of this is absolutely essential. We are quite lucky. Well before this happened, we implemented a system called Workplace, which allows groups to be formed and lots of communication. And we do weekly videos. So I do a weekly video to my cake team. My MD on the other side does a weekly video to his bread team. The CEO does a video to the group, and in that it's all about communicating, it's all about reassuring. And what we do also, we publish all those little acts of kindness that you just talked about there. We publish them on the Workplace to show that we're giving cakes and bread products out to NHS, police, hospice, all kinds of things. And at Easter, we sent everyone home from the bread and the cake division with a little goodie bag with hot cross buns and a cake in it and stuff like that. And I think the team have always been quite good at that, you know, lollipops in the summer and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, it's those little acts of kindness. We've given everyone free tea and coffee. You'd have thought we'd just given them £1 million.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of gratification. What people want is they want someone to say thank you. We all live our lives with a massive need for positive affirmation, and positive affirmation isn't necessarily a big bag of cash. It literally is a pack of hot cross buns. And I think that's really a great point. I think it's really key to keep communicating and saying thank you.
The other thing we did was we listened to a lot of the people, and they were talking about just their fears, you know, from a medical perspective. And we've been talking quite a bit recently about parity of pay. So we engaged a company called Perkbox. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And one of the aspects of Perkbox that it gives us is that everybody now in my company has an access to a private GP within 2 hours, regardless of what level, what role we play, irrelevant to any of that. So instead of, a top 10 having, private medical cover, we've done it across the whole business. And actually what people have been really, really positive about it, because it might not be that about coronavirus, but they don't want to go to the GP about the mole on their leg, because of all the risks in doing that. And at the most, it might take them 2 weeks to get an appointment with the GP in normal times, never mind in these sort of unprecedented times. So it was just to see how much we could help people. And actually, at the end of the day, it means that people aren't taking half a day off, using their holiday for half a day to get a phone call or a video call with a private GP. So it's quite been really successful.
Some really fantastic positive stories there. And you actually, that was my final question of today before the summary was, can you share any of the acts of kindness that you've seen or some of the positive news stories? So on that note, before we kind of summarize for today, are there any other key things that you've seen personally or professionally? They don't even need to be necessarily good news stories from the workplace, but things that you've observed that you thought, you know what, actually that's maybe that's put a smile on my face, or that's made me think a little bit differently given these present times?
Well, I think you need to come to terms and accept what's going on, right? The other day, I spoke to someone about productivity. He said, I'm working from home, I'm not as productive. I said, no, you're not as productive as before Corona. But don't compare anything before Corona, because you have to look forward. So actually, you might have had a very, very productive day, and you should be very pleased. And it doesn't matter if your child or your dog barks, or whatever. It's just now part of that new environment. So to a certain extent, accept it, embrace it, and look forward in a positive fashion. But forget about how you would measure yourself, how you measure your people, how you measure your family, how you measure your neighbor to the past, because it's no longer relevant.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say as well, I quite enjoy looking into people's houses. I don't know if it's because I personally am a little bit nosy, or whether it is just because I feel a slight increased sense of connectivity or being closer to that person, because it's like a window into their life and a window into their soul almost. So having a dog running around, or in fact my puppy pulled my microphone out the other day, and whilst it was embarrassing, I thought, hey, actually that is just what new life is about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's nice. Yeah. There are nice aspects about all this. We have to embrace those.
Exactly, and it's probably for all of you who are work many hours in the day as business leaders, probably a really good amount of time that you're getting to spend with the families.
Yes, except the drinking me out of house at home. And you get university-age children home. You wouldn't believe how much they drink.
Yeah, mine are too young still to drink that me out of house and home, but it's good to I spend a lot of time, in fact most of my week away, so it's been a very different environment being available for my kids, a lot more trampolining than I've ever enjoyed in my life. But yeah, it's great. But you come back to, Layla, you asked a question about some of the positivity. The positivity I've seen around the place is just the increased caring that everybody's got for each other. Whether it is giving someone cakes, whether it's giving someone cheese, whether it's buying someone shopping. But the greatest thing I've seen is just looking out for each other. Contacting each other. Don't ask about work. Don't talk about work. Just ask how you're feeling. Is it driving you mad being in the same place the whole time, being with the same people all the time? Just literally reaching out to each other. And I think that caring aspect has been great. And you see that across workplace as well as in the public environment. So it's good.
Thank you ever so much, all of you, for taking the time out to be part of this virtual lounge today. And I'm absolutely sure that all of our listeners, when they tune in on demand, will have gleaned a lot of positive advice and guidance. And just by way of summary, I've been making notes as you've all been speaking, but I think important, obviously, that we do follow government guidelines, where we can, whilst whilst we don't have a crystal ball, we do look to the market when it comes to future trends. Consumer behaviour, habits are certainly going to change a significant amount. So very, very important, obviously, to pay attention to what is happening. And I think, even more so, possibly to look at how we can really provide that personal and human service, because unique selling points, I think, often come by way of customer service and by way of how we look after others given times of crisis. And hopefully we do see businesses that have really adapted to change positively and who have really listened to the consumers and shown they can do business for good and for wider society as well. These kind of businesses I very much hope will rise to the top. But certainly for all those leaders who are listening in, if you think you haven't communicated enough, communicate more. You really cannot possibly communicate too much at times like this, but really try and harness some of the powers of connectivity, especially within FMCG and manufacturing environments often have previously been deemed as perhaps being a little bit old school. Well, actually, this is a time to really embrace, if you're not already, embrace and harness the digital ways of working. And certainly for leaders, don't be a stranger. I think many leaders often do feel like they're alone. They're often the ones who are number one at the top and don't have people to talk to because they are trying to reassure everyone else. Make sure you've got a good network to tap into, whether it be other business leaders outside of your immediate organization, or whether it be friends or family members to be able to talk to. But ultimately, whilst we can't plan whether this will be V-shape or an L-shaped recovery or what will happen in the future, one thing is definitely for sure, and that is if we can all be thankful and grateful for what we have at present, be open and honest as much as we possibly can with our organizations, with business leaders who are out there, and with our families. At the end of the day, everyone, whether they're in work or whether at home, wants to be involved in the conversation. So let's be as inclusive as we possibly can. And in the words of Lawrence, actually, to finish off today, acts of kindness. The need for positive affirmation is like a pack of hot cross buns. I think that's brilliant. So we should probably do that quote from from today. But again,
I could have put cake product in there.
I know. And I see that James has dropped off somehow, but I was going to ask him before he went how you freeze cheese, because clearly we know that you can freeze cake and you can freeze meat. And
put it in the freezer. Hard cheese is just put them in the freezer.
I can't believe it. I mean, this is that actually alone has changed my life. I'm such a cheese fan, and now I know that I can freeze it. That is just incredible. So thank you very, very much, all of you, for being here today. My name is Layla Mackenzie Dallas, and you've been listening to the Dial Global Virtual Lounge in our Leading in Uncertain Times series. If you've missed anything at all or you want to catch up again on demand, please do visit us at www.dialglobal.org. We have got a special COVID-19 support hub at the moment, so all of the details from today's show will be on there, so you can check it out or share it amongst your team, friends and family afterwards, and it's completely free to access. Thank you very much again, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.